Hi, this is your host Swapnil Bhartia and welcome to TFR Let's Talk. And today we have with us Gerred Dillon, co-founder and CTO of Mycelial. Gerred, it's great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, Swap.
You folks raised 3.8 million to kind of securely keep data and state in sync for any app under any network condition in easy 3 clicks. I want to talk a lot about the things that you folks are doing, but before that, since you're also a co-founder, I want to know the story of the company and what is also the story behind the name.
My co-founders and I were working in the cloud native space for the past 5 years, and as we started to see the cloud native space mature, we often see that there was a missing component as more and more devices were pushing out to the edge. So you have a very mature environment from development to deployment to observability. But as soon as you head out to the edge, you end up in a chasm, and development there often looks like it did 5 to 10 years ago. So my co-founders and I were discussing this and realized there was an opportunity to really go solve these problems as software started to expand out to these edge areas, right? And we have more sensor data than ever. Where we got to the name Mycelial was this idea that there is a mycelial network in the forest. And so if you think about the fungal kingdom, at the top you see mushrooms, but through the forest you have an entire network of fungi that is supplying the forest. So a mycelial network is able to transmit nutrients between trees and plants, right? You have instances where tree stumps are even kept alive for years by these networks. And then also you have a whole bunch of other interesting things about them. So our namesake comes from this ability to efficiently federate and support entire ecosystems that rise above them.
Thanks for explaining that. Now, if I ask purely from technical background perspective, what exactly do you folks do? You did talk about the challenges at the edge, but explain, what do you folks do?
So what we're doing is we are building out a system for replicated data types at the edge. And this is a very difficult thing if you're considering normal event-based systems. We go and we build out, you start a business, and event sourcing is incredibly popular. But what we're ultimately doing is trying to serialize state over the wire and then re-hydrate it into objects at either side. So from a technical perspective, what Mycelial is doing is empowering people from a distributed systems perspective to use tools like conflict-free replicated data types, or CRDTs. We're empowering them to use WebAssembly and other technologies at the edge without having to have a deep background in distributed systems to get that right.
You folks, have been working in this space for a very long time, you and your founder. If I ask you, how has this space changed over the couple of years? Because we are not only seeing new paradigms, we talk of DevOps, DevSecOps, all those, new cultural paradigm, but we're also looking at a lot of technical shifts that are happening. A lot of folks are moving to the cloud. We're also seeing emergence of edge as edge data center, not necessarily small tiny sensors. So talk about what kind of changes, trends are you seeing in this space?
Yes, so the first thing I want to talk about with that is an article written by Peter Levine back in 2017 called The End of Cloud Computing. And it was this observation that there's an explosion of sensor data at the edge, where we want to perform tasks in the real world around sensing, inferring, and acting on things that are on data that is occurring out in the real world. And then from a centralized perspective, we want to learn about that and build better experiences. So there's been this massive shift. We did a whole bunch of research as we were building this out and talking to customers and exploring. But what we discovered was that at the edge, sensors are generating an absolutely staggering amount of data. So IDC estimates that the data volume coming off of IoT devices alone will increase from 13 zettabytes in 2019 to roughly 80 zettabytes by 2025. And this is only going to grow more urgent, right? So what we wanted to do was go and respond to this, because our network links cannot support this. We have more compute on either side of the network link than ever, but we cannot rely on a paradigm that relies entirely on making decisions at the cloud. So if you were to look at the past 10 years and the shift that's going on is, if you look at the software as a service model, it succeeded because the cloud was able to be the complete arbiter of those decisions, right? And as the compute power at the edge grows, everything from a watch to a temperature sensor, right? Some of these can even run massive amounts of compute. They need to be able to make these processing decisions in a very low latency way. So that's the big shift we're seeing, is that in these environments, there's often either not enough time, not enough bandwidth. There's no way to maintain the quality service across that link. And so there's a bigger need than ever to actually do that local compute.
Excellent. I also want to understand how are things changing with data, because the fact is apps can come and go. You can very easily but data is where the real value lies. That's the real asset of any company. When we talk about cloud, data gravity happens. A lot of with vendor lock-in, your data get locked. With Mycelial, how do you ensure that, or if you do ensure that users remain the owner of their data?
The issues with SaaS companies and data is often, as you just mentioned, SaaS companies come and go, the data is proprietary. And this, I do think in Kubernetes and cloud native caused a reaction to that hurt SaaS companies in a lot of ways, where that data became very proprietary and created a demand for customers to own their own data. But the cloud native movement designed solutions to that in one way. So from a data ownership perspective, at Mycelial, we think that is incredibly critical, that data is portable over time. So from one perspective, as we start to stabilize, we're open sourcing the protocols and everything that we're doing, enabling companies to have complete ownership of that and not be just reliant on a software as a service there. The other thing is ensuring portability, right? We have not designed systems where, for example, if I'm building an electric car and another company is building an electric car charger, to be able to share and exchange data between those. And what we're working on really heavily at Mycelial is to facilitate that ability for that exchange by unifying the concept of data with their compute. And I think this is really, really important for, as we're generating more sensor data, as more data at the edge than ever, that not only is it portable, not only is it's owned, but it's also open and accessible and usable so that many entities can take advantage of it and work together.
Let's now go back to the company and talk about the funding. Talk about what are the areas that you folks are planning to grow? What are the areas you'll be investing into?
So the ideas we're working on are really ones that are well-founded over in a lot of spaces. So for example, we are built on top of something called the Beam VM, Erlang and Elixir. It's well used in the telephony and telecom space. And one of the big principles of that was to create systems where individual components of that system can crash without affecting the rest of that system at all. So it enables highly resilient systems. And that is one of our core ideas of building very resilient applications and very resilient data in the face of a lot of real world issues, right? Networks are unreliable. You may go unplug a device. You may, it may just reach the end of its service life, right? If we're talking about a satellite, it re-enters the atmosphere. But we still want to be able to access everything that we want to know about that and not have the entire network crash because something happens. And so that's one of our big ideas. And so what we're doing with that is building out a system for deploying out distributed actors, which is really great for building out digital twins. And alongside that, we're combining that with best-in-class ideas coming out of academia, like these conflict-free replicated data types. And the idea there is, if you and I are writing out to the same area, the system shouldn't crash, right? It should offer people the ability to reconcile that information and move forward at a higher level than having to go solve that issue over and over again. If you look at event sourcing, which is fantastic. It often is bespoke in these various organizations where we start to solve a problem. Hey, what do our events look like? Right? What's the shape of the messages across the wire? And I think often that what's really important in that gets lost. So we want to be able to unify that instead of saying, I'm going to go start a project, I'm going to go create a product, that instead of asking, well, what's the shape of my event? Well, what's the shape of my data, right? Let's focus on that. And then Mycelial is the communications runtime that then facilitates the most efficient way to move that across the wire. And so that's how we use those ideas to actually perform that task. One thing that we're really noticing, and whether this makes it or not, with the chip shortage, we're noticing that a lot more, you have the same product with often very different hardware profiles and makeups. And companies need to be able to deal with that if we're not going to have just out of stock for months and months and months, right? Or years at a time. So that is one thing we're really trying to facilitate, is that, like, if we're talking about abstraction layers and the ideas, that is one that's very critical to us to improve the ability of teams and developers to deliver products despite those sort of challenges and constraints in the same way, right? At the data tier.
Gerred, thank you so much for taking time out today and not only talk about the company, but also we talk about the, of course, data and importance of ownership. Thanks for those insights. And I would love to have you back on the show. So I look forward to our next conversation. Thank you today.
Thank you. Have a great day.